So you eat 3 times a day, right? I mean, if you're lucky, maybe more.
Yeah, hopefully.
But the words you use when you look down at your plate, whether you call like a simple salad guilt-free or a chocolate donut sinful, they are doing a lot more than just describing your dinner.
Oh, absolutely. They do so much more.
Right. They are secretly mapping out your stress levels, your social status, your psychological coping mechanisms, and, well, even your fundamental sense of morality.
It's wild when you really look at it.
It is. So today, we are decoding the intense psychology and the hidden societal structures that are, hiding right there in your kitchen. We're taking a linguistic microscope to our food.
And it really is like a linguistic Trojan horse. I mean, we think we are just talking about groceries or recipes, but we are actually revealing our entire worldview.
Right.
The materials we are diving into today, they track this incredible progression. If you look at the linguistic data from the source, it maps how we learn to talk about food literally from the ground up.
Okay, so where does it start?
Well, it starts at what linguists consider base camp. Just basic survival communication, like navigating a kitchen without causing a disaster.
Just getting by.
Exactly. But it scales incredibly fast because before you know it, those exact same linguistic tools are forcing us to confront the toxic realities of modern diet culture.
Wow, yeah.
And the moralization of our bodies and even systemic urban inequalities.
That is a massive leap. And I want to jump right into that base camp because the data points out this deceptively simple linguistic trap that, it perfectly illustrates how easily we disconnect the human being from the food they make.
Oh, I know exactly which one you mean.
Yeah, it's this classic confusion between the words cook, cooker, and chef. Yeah. On the surface, it just sounds like an elementary grammar lesson. But there is a strange philosophical quirk here about how English isolates the machine from the person.
There really is. And, the confusion stems from a very logical assumption about English rules that just completely breaks down in the kitchen. Well, in almost every other scenario, adding the suffix "er" to an action verb gives you the human performing the action.
Right, like a person who builds is a builder.
Yes. A person who farms is a farmer. So logically, a person who cooks must be a cooker.
Makes total sense.
It does, but English forcefully rejects that. According to the source material, a cooker is exclusively the large, heavy machine that gets hot, so the stove or the oven.
Which sets up this incredibly awkward, borderline dystopian scenario.
It really does.
Just imagine, you're at a dinner party, right? Your friend's husband has spent 3 hours making this incredible meal. You take a bite, you look him dead in the eye and say, "Wow, you are a great cooker."
Oh, no.
You haven't just made a grammar mistake. You have completely stripped away his humanity.
You really have.
You are complimenting him on his mechanical efficiency.
Yeah.
It's literally like saying, "Dave, you are an absolutely top-tier microwave."
Exactly. You've reduced his labor, his creativity, and his affection, because cooking for someone is often an act of affection. You've reduced all of that to the baseline function of an appliance.
Right. So
the linguistic data demands we categorize this strictly. The appliance is the cooker. The human being making the food at home out of love or necessity, the amateur, is simply the cook.
Okay, right. But what about the chef? Because, people throw that word around a lot to flatter their friends. Like, "Oh, you're a real chef now."
True. We use it as flattery all the time, but technically, based on the text, that's a misclassification.
Really?
Yeah. The definition we are analyzing strips away the romance and defines a chef purely by commerce.
Commerce.
Yes. A chef is a professional. They work in a commercial kitchen. And crucially, they perform this labor for a salary.
Oh, I see.
So a cook operates out of a domestic space, whereas a chef operates out of an economic one.
Okay, so let me get this straight. My oven is a cooker. I am a cook. And the person charging me $50 for a steak downtown is a chef. It's a funny quirk, but it actually perfectly sets up the next layer of this linguistic data, which is where communication becomes a matter of actual physical safety.
Yes, the stakes get much higher.
Right, because once we figure out who is making the food, the immediate next hurdle is establishing what we absolutely cannot put into our bodies. We have to communicate our dietary boundaries. And man, this is a social minefield.
It really is a minefield. The sociological observation here is fascinating because navigating dietary restrictions isn't just about the food. It is a high-stakes negotiation of social grace.
Definitely.
The linguistic framework from our source parses these restrictions into 3 distinct tiers. The first tier is the phrase allergic to, and this is a hard biological stop.
Right, so this isn't a preference. This is the medical emergency tier. Peanuts, shellfish, dairy, that kind of thing.
Exactly. When you use the phrase allergic to, you are signaling a physiological crisis. You are telling your host that even cross-contamination on a cutting board could result in a hospital visit. It triggers a profound responsibility on the part of the person making the food.
It's serious.
Very. But the second tier is where the social negotiation gets a bit, well, murkier. This is the word intolerant.
Oh, like lactose intolerance or gluten intolerance.
Yes. From a linguistic and sociological standpoint, intolerant communicates a non-emergency that still carries severe consequences.
Right.
You aren't going into anaphylactic shock, but it is going to cause immense physical pain and essentially ruin your evening.
Nobody wants that.
Yeah.
But here's where I want to push back, or at least point out something that happens in the real world all the time.
Go for it.
The third tier of this framework is the phrase, I don't eat, as in, I don't eat red meat or I don't eat processed sugar.
Right. The lifestyle choice.
Right. Yeah, this is a purely ethical, religious, or personal choice.
Mm-hmm.
Physiology is completely removed from the equation. But, I mean, don't we constantly see people hijacking the first tier claiming they're allergic to something when they really just mean, I don't eat it?
Yes, absolutely. And sociologists and linguists have actually studied this phenomenon heavily.
Why do people lie about it?
Well, why do people lie about allergies? It is because, as a society, we often fail to respect the boundary of I don't eat.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. If you sit at a dinner party and say, I don't eat sugar, someone at the table will almost inevitably try to peer pressure you.
Always. They're like, oh, just have a little bite, live a little. You're being so rigid.
Exactly. A personal boundary is treated as a negotiation.
That is so annoying.
It is. But if you say, I am allergic to sugar, the negotiation instantly stops.
Boom, done.
Right. So people adopt the medical vocabulary of the first tier because society just hasn't matured enough to simply accept the personal autonomy of the third tier.
That is so true. It's basically an incredible defense mechanism.
Yeah.
I want you, the listener, to just think about the last time you hosted a dinner party or went to a restaurant with a large group.
It's exhausting.
Think about the intense mental gymnastics required just to get the order right. You're juggling the friend who is genuinely allergic to shellfish, the colleague who is lactose intolerant, and your partner who ethically won't touch red meat.
Yes.
We have to deploy these highly specific linguistic tools just to survive a Friday night dinner without offending anyone or, sending them to the emergency room.
And this brings us to a critical pivot in the research. Because once those physiological and ethical boundaries are established, once you actually know what is permitted on the plate, the language fundamentally shifts.
Where does it go?
We move away from the stationary objects and the static rules, and we begin to describe the tempo. We enter the vocabulary of speed, exhaustion, and velocity.
Right, because nobody actually eats in a vacuum. We eat in the real world, and the real world is, constantly running late. The source material highlights this incredible contrast between two very specific actions, whipping up and wolfing down. And what strikes me here is how these words aren't just verbs. They are like indictments of our modern schedules.
They absolutely are indictments. If we look at the phrase to whip up, it describes an act of creation, but one defined entirely by a severe lack of time.
Yeah, you're not taking your time.
No, you aren't leisurely braising a stew on a Sunday afternoon. Whipping up implies opening the refrigerator, assessing a random assortment of ingredients, and synthesizing a meal in 20 minutes through sheer necessity.
It has this almost frantic improvisational energy like, oh no, I forgot we had to eat today. Let me just whip something up.
Exactly.
It's a 20-minute omelet. It's pasta with whatever was left rotting in the crisper drawer.
But the crucial element is that whipping up still retains a shred of dignity.
Oh, right.
You are still participating in the act of cooking. The dark mirror to this, according to the text, is the phrase wolfing down or scarfing down.
Oh man, yeah.
This describes the desperate, rapid, almost mechanical consumption of food when you are either incredibly hungry or, more likely, chronically late.
I have to say, the animalistic imagery of wolfing down is brilliant because it is so incredibly visceral.
Very visceral.
When someone says they wolf down a sandwich, you do not picture them sitting at a table with a napkin on their lap, chewing 30 times before swallowing.
No, not at all.
You picture someone unhinging their jaw like a snake while standing over the kitchen sink.
Exactly. Over the sink.
It is primal. We're abandoning thousands of years of civilized table manners just to get calories into our bloodstream before we sprint to the next meeting.
Which begs the question, why are we eating like starving predators?
Wait.
Sociologists point out that the velocity of our consumption is a direct reflection of the time scarcity of modern labor. The Industrial Revolution and now the hyper-connected digital age has squeezed the traditional mealtime down to a mere pit stop.
Wow.
We view the food not as an experience to be savored, but as crude fuel required to maintain productivity.
Which completely changes our relationship with the concept of a meal. When you are wolfing something down, you aren't tasting it. You're just trying to silence a biological alarm bell.
Exactly.
And this lifestyle of constant rushing leads directly to two other highly prevalent concepts the text highlights. Eating out and cutting out.
Right. Eating out is just the natural consequence of being too exhausted to whip something up. You simply outsource the labor to a restaurant.
Makes sense.
But the psychological weight really lives in the term cutting out, especially when the material distinguishes it from cutting down on.
Okay, let's explore that. Because they sound almost identical, but the behavioral difference is massive, isn't it?
It is. The difference is moderation versus absolute elimination.
Okay.
Cutting down on implies a reduction. You recognize a behavior might be slightly detrimental, so you moderate it. You cut down on caffeine by only having 1 coffee in the morning instead of 3.
That sounds reasonable.
But cutting out is a zero-tolerance policy. If you say you have cut out carbohydrates, it means absolute zero. It is a rigid, uncompromising wall you build around a specific ingredient.
But why do we do that? Why is cutting out so much more common in diet culture than cutting down? Because realistically, having 1 cookie isn't going to ruin your life. Why do we gravitate toward the extreme zero-tolerance policy?
Because of a psychological concept known as decision fatigue or ego depletion.
Ego depletion.
Yeah. Moderation requires constant active choice. If you're cutting down on cookies every time you walk into the kitchen, your brain has to run a complex calculation.
Oh, like a math problem.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Have I had too many today? Did I exercise enough to earn this? Will I regret this later? That requires immense cognitive energy.
And if you're already exhausted from work, you don't have that energy.
Precisely. But cutting out requires zero active decision-making. The rule is simply, I do not eat cookies, ever. The decision is pre-made. In a world where we are overwhelmed by choices, creating a rigid, absolute rule feels safer. It feels like control. Even if it is biologically unsustainable, psychologically, it is a massive relief.
That makes so much sense. It's easier to be a zealot than it is to be moderate.
It really is.
And this totally sets up the scenario the source material provides, which perfectly strings all these concepts together into this chaotic, highly relatable weekend cycle. Let's walk through this, because this is the quintessential rhythm of modern eating.
Please set the scene for us.
Okay, so it's Friday night. You and your partner are completely drained from the work week. You have no energy to whip up dinner.
None at all.
So you make the easiest choice. You eat out at that new Italian restaurant down the street. It's the end of the week. You want to celebrate just surviving. So you go all out. You have the pasta, the wine, the garlic bread. You leave feeling completely stuffed and slightly lethargic.
The indulgence phase?
Right. But then Saturday morning arrives and the psychological pendulum swings violently in the exact opposite direction. The guilt sets in. You feel heavy. So your brain craves control.
Yep.
You make a zero-tolerance declaration. That's it. I'm cutting out all carbs and heavy foods today. So at noon, you just whip up a tiny dressing-free salad.
You are attempting to atone for Friday night through physical restriction.
Exactly. You're trying to balance the ledger. But here is the biological reality. That tiny salad was not enough fuel.
Not even close.
So by the time 7 p.m. rolls around, you aren't just hungry, you are ravenous. Yeah. The starvation alarm is ringing. Your absolute rule completely shatters, and you end up standing in the kitchen, wolfing down cold leftover chicken and half a block of cheese in pure desperation.
It's a tragic comedy, really, but it is such an incredibly human narrative.
It really is.
Within a 24-hour window, we swing from outsourcing our indulgence, eating out, to punishing ourselves with strict boundaries, cutting out, to frantic, inadequate creation, whipping up, and finally to animalistic desperation, wolfing down.
We use these simple phrasal verbs every day, but when you string them together like that, they aren't just describing food. They are describing guilt, fatigue, haste, and hunger. It's a complete emotional cycle.
Which serves as the perfect logical transition into the next major layer of our analysis. Because that narrative of the weekend struggle proves that eating is rarely just about calories.
Right.
We are now entering the territory where things get deeply internal. We are looking at the psychology on the plate.
This is where it gets incredibly fascinating. We are moving from the physical mechanics of eating, the speed, the location, the allergies, to the emotional weight of it.
Yes.
Why do our brains weaponize certain foods against us? The text brings up two concepts that are so deeply ingrained in our culture we barely question them. Comfort food and emotional eating.
And we really must question them because the biological mechanisms beneath them are incredibly powerful. The text defines emotional eating as the act of consuming food, not because your body requires energy to function, but because your mind requires soothing from a negative stimulus.
Like what?
Stress, sadness, anxiety, loneliness.
So we are literally self-medicating with ingredients.
Yes. And the prescription is never random. If you think about the concept of comfort food, no one ever seeks out a bowl of steamed broccoli after a devastating breakup or a horrible day at the office.
Never. I've never cried into a bowl of broccoli.
Exactly. The text points out that comfort foods are almost universally high in carbohydrates, high in fat, and high in sugar. Macaroni and cheese, ice cream, mashed potatoes, chocolate.
But why? I mean, is it just because they taste good, or is there a chemical override happening here? Because when I am stressed, my brain doesn't just politely suggest a donut. It demands it.
There's an absolute chemical override. When you experience intense stress, your body releases a hormone called cortisol.
Okay, cortisol.
Evolutionarily, cortisol is supposed to prepare you to run away from a physical threat, like a predator. To do that, your body demands quick, readily available energy. It demands sugar and simple carbohydrates. So your biological hardware is screaming for high-calorie fuel to survive a physical threat, even though the actual threat is just an email from your boss.
Wow. So our ancient biology is completely misreading modern psychological stress. We are fueling up to sprint away from a tiger, but we're just sitting at a desk.
Exactly. And when you consume those high-sugar, high-carb foods, your brain releases a massive surge of serotonin and dopamine.
The feel-good chemicals.
Yes. These are neurotransmitters that promote feelings of calm, pleasure, and well-being. It is a rapid, highly effective chemical dampener for the cortisol. So emotional eating isn't a sign of weakness. It is a highly efficient biological coping mechanism working exactly as designed.
That's reassuring.
But the problem is that the relief is strictly temporary.
And there's also the nostalgia factor, right? The text specifically links comfort food to childhood. It uses the example of failing an exam and instantly craving macaroni and cheese.
Yes, the psychological layer works in tandem with the biological one. Our brains have an incredibly strong associative memory tied to smell and taste.
Oh, definitely.
When we eat foods that we strongly associate with childhood, a time when ideally we felt protected, cared for, and completely unburdened by adult anxieties, we aren't just ingesting calories.
What are we doing?
We are attempting to ingest that feeling of safety. We are trying to eat our way back to a time before the stress existed.
I really want you, the listener, to pause and interrogate your own brain for a second. Think about your absolute worst days. What is your ultimate comfort food?
It's a great question.
Right. When everything goes wrong, what is the specific dish your mind conjures as the ultimate remedy? Maybe it's a specific brand of instant ramen. Maybe it's a chocolate chip cookie that tastes vaguely like the ones your grandmother made.
Yes.
That craving isn't random. It is a complex intersection of your unique childhood memories and your body's desperate demand for a serotonin spike. It's your psychological thumbprint.
It is a profound realization. But the text doesn't stop at the comfort. It immediately forces us to look at the collateral damage of these biological demands. It introduces the idiom of the sweet tooth.
Right. We talk about having a sweet tooth like it's a cute, harmless personality trait. Oh, don't leave me alone with that cake. I have such a sweet tooth.
But the text carefully connects this seemingly harmless craving to map out a very common, very dangerous psychological cycle.
How does it do that?
When you combine the chronic stress of modern life, which drives emotional eating, with a biological predisposition for sugar, the sweet tooth, the inevitable result is weight gain. And in our society, weight gain triggers an intense psychological response of panic.
Because society tells us that gaining weight is the ultimate failure, which means that panic demands an immediate, drastic solution.
Exactly, and that panic is the birthplace of the crash diet or the fad diet.
The text is very clear to separate these from normal, healthy changes in eating habits. A fad diet might be a short-term trend, but a crash diet is an act of extreme desperation. It's the zero-tolerance cutting out concept we talked about earlier, but taken to an incredibly dangerous extreme.
Medically speaking, a crash diet is a severe caloric restriction that promises rapid, biologically impossible weight loss, losing 10 kilos in a single week.
The source material uses this example that is almost comical in its absurdity, but people actually do it. It describes someone trying to lose weight for an upcoming wedding by going on a diet where they consume nothing but cabbage juice.
Cabbage juice.
Just drinking liquid cabbage for days on end.
It sounds absurd, but it highlights the profound desperation involved. Why would a rational, intelligent person torture themselves with cabbage juice?
Right. Why?
Because the emotional eating made them feel out of control, the subsequent weight gain induced panic, and the crash diet offers a seductive, extreme illusion of control. It is a way of punishing the body into submission.
But wait, if everyone fundamentally knows that drinking only cabbage juice for a week is miserable and unsustainable, why is the diet industry worth billions of dollars? Are we just biologically hardwired to fall for the promise of a quick fix?
We are hardwired to seek immediate relief from psychological pain. The critical assertion the text makes is that crash diets never work long-term.
Never.
And the reason they fail isn't a lack of willpower, it is basic metabolic science. When you suddenly starve your body, which is what a cabbage juice diet is, your body doesn't know you are trying to fit into a wedding dress. It thinks you are in a famine.
Oh, right. The biological alarm goes off again.
Your metabolism aggressively slows down to conserve energy. It holds on to every ounce of fat it can to keep you alive.
Wow.
And the moment you break the diet, because you inevitably will because you're starting, your body rapidly stores everything you eat as fat to prepare for the next famine.
That is wild.
The crash diet guarantees its own failure. The psychology is fatally flawed because it treats the human body as an enemy to be starved and conquered rather than a biological system to be nourished.
This is such a heavy realization. We've moved so far past figuring out the difference between a cook and a cooker. We are talking about utilizing food to self-medicate our emotional pain, and then utilizing extreme starvation diets to punish ourselves for that exact same medication. It is a brutal cycle.
It is brutal, but understanding it is necessary to prepare us for the final ascent of this analysis. Because up until now, we have been focused inward. We've been looking at why the individual reaches for the food.
Right? Why I eat a donut when I'm sad.
Exactly. But to truly grasp the power of this language, we must zoom all the way out. We have to look at the overarching societal structures that define these words.
Okay, take a deep breath, listeners. Because we are now entering the final, most complex tier of this deep dive. We are shifting from individual psychology to societal judgment.
Yes.
We are going to analyze how society views you, categorizes you, and judges your fundamental worth based on that donut.
And it's intense. The first major concept we encounter at the societal level is the moralization of food. And sociologists argue that this is one of the most profound cultural shifts of the last century.
How so?
Well, historically, food was viewed purely as caloric energy. You needed it to work the fields, to survive the winter. But today, food has been imbued with intense morality.
Let's talk about how this actually sounds in our everyday language, because it is so normalized we don't even hear it anymore.
Right.
The text points out how we routinely label certain foods as clean, good, or guilt-free,
while simultaneously labeling other foods as bad, dirty, or sinful.
Sinful chocolate cake. A guilt-free, low-calorie snack. We're using heavy, religious, moralistic terminology to describe a plate of inanimate ingredients. A cake hasn't committed a crime. A piece of lettuce didn't go to confession. Why are we talking about them like they possess a soul?
Because the vocabulary isn't actually about the food. This is the critical insight sociologists highlight. When we moralize the food, the moral weight inevitably transfers from the object to the subject.
Meaning what?
We are moralizing the person who is eating it.
So if I sit in the break room at work and eat a massive sugary brownie that society has labeled bad or sinful, society isn't just saying the brownie is bad, it's saying I am bad.
Precisely. If you eat the clean, guilt-free salad, society deems you to be a good, disciplined, virtuous person. You have self-control. But if you succumb to the sinful brownie, society labels you as weak, gluttonous, or lacking in moral fiber.
Wait, isn't some of this just harmless marketing? Companies just want to sell diet bars, so they call them guilt-free. It's a catchy slogan.
It begins as marketing, but it metastasizes into our collective psychology. And this is exactly the prevailing critique the text brings forward regarding the modern fitness and diet industry.
And just to be clear to the listener, we are analyzing the sociological arguments presented in the source text here. We aren't taking a personal stance on the fitness industry. We're just exploring what the text says.
Exactly. The text states, and this is a heavy quote to unpack, it says the fitness industry thrives on the moralization of food, creating a toxic diet culture that equates physical thinness with moral superiority.
I just want to sit with that phrase for a second.
Uh.
Equates physical thinness with moral superiority. It is brilliant, and it is terrifying.
It is.
It argues that we have taken a basic biological act and transformed it into a metric of human worth. We have created a secular religion where your physical shape is viewed as a direct reflection of your character. If you are thin, you are good. If you are not, you are a moral failure.
It demonstrates the immense structural power of language. The words clean and guilt-free are the building blocks of a systemic hierarchy. When you internalize that vocabulary, you start policing your own worth based on your caloric intake.
And it doesn't stop with calories. The text pivots here to show how this moral judgment expands beyond what we eat into how the food was produced. This brings us to the concept of ethical consumption.
Right.
Because if we are going to judge people for eating bad calories, we also start judging them for eating unethical calories.
This is a complex intersection of linguistics, sociology, and economics. Ethical consumption is defined as the practice of actively analyzing the entire supply chain of your food to minimize social and environmental damage.
The source text creates a very stark contrast here. On one side, you have the rejection of factory farming. The text describes this as the industrial, cruel mass production of animals.
Yes.
It's terrible for the environment, it's terrible for the animals, it's terrible for the workers. So the moral counter to this is ethical consumption. You buy sustainable, fair trade, organic, locally sourced agriculture. You want the pasture-raised chicken. You want the coffee beans where the farmer was paid a living wage.
It is objectively a noble pursuit. Understanding the environmental impact of our food systems is vital. However, the text introduces a massive critical caveat that shatters the moral high ground of this philosophy.
What's the caveat?
It points out that ethical consumption is inherently an extreme privilege.
And this is where the conversation hits the absolute bedrock of reality. Because ethical consumption requires a massive amount of resources. It takes money, it takes time to research, and it takes geographic access.
Exactly.
To afford the $12 carton of pasture-raised eggs, you have to be in a specific economic class. And the text directly contrasts this privilege with the devastating reality of food deserts.
To understand the linguistic and societal impact of a food desert, we have to look at urban geography. A food desert isn't a place where there is absolutely no food.
Right.
It is a specific urban or rural area where the ability to purchase affordable, fresh, high-quality, nourishing food is practically impossible.
I really want to paint a picture of this for the listener, because the term desert is evocative, but it can be misleading. Imagine living in a densely populated neighborhood. There are stores everywhere.
Yes, tons of stores.
But the nearest actual grocery store that sells fresh produce, apples, spinach, raw chicken is 2 bus transfers and an hour-long commute away. The only things available within walking distance of your apartment are fast food chains, gas stations, and corner convenience stores.
And if you look at the supply chain logistics of a corner store, they operate on completely different margins than a supermarket. An apple rots in a week. A box of heavily processed, high-sugar snack cakes can sit on a shelf for 6 months.
Wow.
Therefore, the shelves in a food desert are exclusively lined with highly processed, shelf-stable items.
So the people living in these neighborhoods, who are often historically marginalized and low income due to decades of systemic issues like redlining and poor urban planning, they are left with virtually no choices.
Exactly. They are trapped in a system of chronic food insecurity. The daily reality is acquiring enough baseline calories to keep a family fed on an incredibly tight budget.
And this brings us to what I think is the most powerful paradigm-shifting sentence in the entire source text. It synthesizes this entire C1C2 summit.
Lay it on us.
The quote is, "You cannot demand sustainable eating from a population that is struggling just to survive."
It is a definitive statement. It completely shatters the illusion that healthy or ethical eating is merely a matter of personal willpower or moral fortitude.
Right. If you are a single parent working 2 shifts, taking a 2-hour round trip on a bus just to buy organic spinach is impossible. You buy the processed food from the corner store because it is cheap, accessible, and calorie-dense.
Exactly.
This concept forces us to realize that the moralization of food we talked about earlier, judging people for not eating clean or ethical meals, is often just a disguised way of punishing the poor for a systemic infrastructure failure. We are judging their morality when we should be judging their geography.
It demands that we look far beyond our own plates. We have moved from the vocabulary of a domestic kitchen to the heavy vocabulary of social justice and systemic inequality.
It is absolutely mind-blowing. We started this hour talking about how not to insult a friend's husband at a dinner party, and we ended up dissecting the socioeconomic structures that dictate human survival in modern cities.
It's a huge journey. I think a rapid synthesis of this journey is essential for the listener to truly grasp how interconnected these concepts are.
Please, take us all the way from the base camp to the summit one last time.
We began at the absolute foundation, mastering the mechanics of physical boundaries. We learned the vital difference between a medical crisis, being allergic to, a physical discomfort, being intolerant, and an ethical boundary, the phrase, "I don't eat."
Right.
And crucially, we learned that an oven is a cooker, preventing us from stripping the humanity away from the cook.
A trap we will never fall into again.
We then built upon that foundation by examining the frantic tempo of modern life through phrasal verbs. We explored how time scarcity forces us to haphazardly whip up meals, and how extreme exhaustion causes us to eat out or animalistically wolf down our food.
The velocity of it all.
Yes. This lack of control often triggers the psychological pendulum, causing us to rigidly cut out ingredients in an attempt to regain order.
The endless, exhausting weekend cycle.
Which forced us to turn inward. Analyzing the intense psychology of the plate, we examine how our biology demands comfort food to spike serotonin during times of high cortisol stress, leading to emotional eating.
Self-medication.
We connected the biological reality of the sweet tooth to the panicked starvation response of the medically dangerous crash diet.
The cabbage juice diet. A monument to human desperation.
And finally, we scaled the philosophical summit, analyzing how society weaponizes this entire vocabulary. We examined the toxic moralization of food, where a multi-billion-dollar diet culture equates physical thinness with moral superiority, judging individuals as good or sinful based on what they consume.
Yeah.
And we concluded by confronting the stark systemic inequality of food deserts, recognizing that the moral high ground of ethical consumption is a profound luxury denied to millions facing daily food insecurity.
It proves, without a doubt, that language isn't just how we describe the world. Is the fundamental architecture we use to construct it. The words we use build the reality we live in. Which leaves me with a final provocative thought for you, the listener, to mull over long after this audio stops.
I'd love to hear it.
Well, we have spent this deep dive analyzing how society controls us, categorizes us, and judges us through this deeply moralized vocabulary of food. We've seen how words like guilt-free, clean, and sinful sustain a toxic diet culture that equates our bodies with our worth. But if language built this cage, couldn't language also dismantle it?
Wow.
Could we, individually, start rewiring this entire toxic culture simply by refusing to participate in its vocabulary? What if you made a conscious decision, starting tomorrow, to never again refer to a dessert as a guilty pleasure?
That would be a huge shift.
What if you refused to call a salad good and a donut bad? What if food was allowed to just be food again? Ingredients, energy, flavor, and nothing more. Does true cultural rebellion, a rebellion against the diet industry and systemic judgment, start quietly, right there on your dinner plate with the words you choose not to say?
That is a fascinating question.
It's something to think about the next time you sit down to eat. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. As always, keep questioning the world and keep questioning the words you use to build it. Bon appétit.
You're likely going through one of the most universal, totally mundane routines of the human experience right now. Or, maybe you just did a few hours ago.
Yeah, everybody does it.
Right. You are standing in your bedroom, staring into a closet, and you're simply getting dressed. You pull a shirt off a hanger, slide your arms through the sleeves, check the mirror, and you head out the door.
It's just entirely automatic.
Exactly. It feels completely automatic. But that seemingly basic everyday act of, putting on clothes is actually a gateway to this massive linguistic, sociological, and even moral journey.
Oh, absolutely. It really is.
So today we are taking a deep dive into a rather unique set of notes. These were originally designed for people learning the English language at an advanced studio. And on the surface, it's just a vocabulary guide.
Right. Just a list of words.
Yeah, but as you read between the lines, it secretly functions as this profound roadmap for understanding the modern world and really decoding human behavior.
It really is an incredible text because it operates on two levels simultaneously. It maps out the evolution of English vocabulary, starting from the basic mechanics of how we talk about getting dressed, all the way up to highly complex economic terms.
Right.
But by following that linguistic evolution, we end up unraveling the global ethical and, sociological impact of the trillion-dollar fashion industry.
Which is wild to think about from just a vocabulary lesson.
Totally. We start with the simple physical laws of a shirt on a body, and by the end, we are analyzing global sustainability, human rights, and the very construction of identity.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because to understand the global fashion industry, we have to start with the absolute basics of physics and time. The source material points out that at the foundational level of English, there is this trap, and it trips up language learners all over the world.
Oh yeah, it's a huge stumbling block.
Right. It is the fundamental difference between two concepts, to put on and to wear.
It seems like a minor grammatical rule, honestly, but it is actually where the physics of dressing comes into play.
How so?
Well, the text highlights that in many languages, you use a single verb to describe both the action of getting dressed and the state of having clothes on your body.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, but English demands this strict, almost mathematical separation of time and state. Like, to put on represents a brief, fleeting physical action.
Just the movement.
Exactly. It is the specific, 3-second window where a garment transitions from not being on your body to being on your body. If it is cold outside, you are putting on your jacket. It is an action in motion. It has a definitive start and a definitive end.
Right. I mean, it is the actual mechanics of sliding your arm into the sleeve, the physical struggle with the fabric.
The wear, on the other hand, is the enduring state that follows that action. It is the reality of having those clothes on your body that last for the entire day.
Right.
The source notes that you cannot say, I am putting on a blue shirt all day.
That would look ridiculous.
It would. That implies a bizarre, never-ending physical wrestling match with your clothes. You also, you do not say, I dress a blue shirt. You dress yourself, but you wear clothes. The English language basically forces you to recognize the exact boundary between an action completing and a state beginning.
It kind of makes me think of hitting the play button on your music app, whereas wearing is the music actually playing in the background all day.
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
Yeah, the play button is just the catalyst. It takes a fraction of a second to press. But the music itself, the wearing, is the continuous state that defines the atmosphere of your whole day.
Definitely.
But I have to ask, why does English hyper-categorize this? I mean, are we just obsessed with the exact measurement of time, or is there something deeper here? Because if other languages get by perfectly fine merging the action and the state, drawing this hard line seems, almost pedantic.
What's fascinating here is how this linguistic separation actually mirrors a psychological boundary that we cross every single morning.
Okay, tell me more.
Well, when a language merges the action and the state, getting dressed is viewed as a holistic, fluid concept. But by separating them, you are forced to consciously acknowledge the transition from your private self to your public self.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Putting on happens in the privacy of your bedroom. It is intimate. You are hitting that play button, like you said.
Yeah.
But the moment you finish putting on, you enter the state of wearing, which means you are now ready to be perceived by the outside world. The language itself is drawing a line between preparation and presentation.
That is a powerful way to look at it. The wearing is the public presentation. And that transition from the private bedroom to the public arena instantly brings us to the next layer of the source material.
Right.
Because once the shirt is actually on your body, once you are in the state of wearing it, you immediately have to confront the geometry and the aesthetics of the garment. You have to face the mirror.
The dreaded mirror test.
Exactly. And this is where the text introduces the distinction between two words we use interchangeably all the time, but we really shouldn't: fit and suit.
This is a crucial leap, honestly, from objective reality to subjective perception. The text defines fit purely by physical size and shape.
Just the math of it.
Entirely about mathematics, geometry, spatial reasoning. If a jacket is physically too narrow for your shoulders or, the sleeves do not reach your wrists, it doesn't fit. It is a factual, undeniable mismatch between the physical dimensions of your body and the physical dimensions of the fabric. It is a measurable truth.
Right. The tape measure does not lie. It is a simple binary. It fits or it doesn't.
Exactly. But suit operates on an entirely different, incredibly complex plane. Suit refers to the subjective realm of style, color, and like the overall aesthetic impact of how the garment makes the wearer look and feel.
The vibe, basically.
Yeah, the vibe. What the text points out is that a garment can perfectly obey the mathematical laws of fit while completely violating the aesthetic laws of what suits the person wearing it.
The source material illustrates this with a really relatable scenario. Imagine someone, let's say a woman, shopping for a spring coat. She finds this bright yellow coat. She puts it on, checks the mirror, and physically, it is flawless. The shoulders align, the length is right, it buttons perfectly, mathematically it fits. Right. But then the panic sets in. She starts agonizing over whether the yellow color actually suits her, because she usually wears dark, muted colors, like black or gray.
Oh, I've been there.
Right.
Yeah.
So she is standing there, perfectly fitted, but aesthetically paralyzed. It literally takes a friend reassuring her that the yellow brings out her skin tone and captures the energy of spring for her to finally accept that it suits her.
It is a brilliant example because it captures the exact moment we elevate from function to emotion. A coat that fits will keep you warm, right?
Yeah.
It serves its biological purpose of protecting the human animal from the elements.
Sure.
But a coat that suits you makes you feel confident. It serves your sociological purpose of presenting an identity to the world. You are evaluating yourself not just as a physical object occupying space, but as a visual entity that is about to be judged and interpreted by others.
But I'll push back on this a little, or at least, play devil's advocate here. If fit is mathematical and suit is emotional, doesn't that mean we spend a vastly disproportionate amount of our time agonizing over the suit part while completely taking fit for granted?
Oh, totally.
Like, we trust the tape measure, we trust the standardized sizing on the rack, but we will stare in a mirror for 20 minutes wondering if a shade of yellow makes us look washed out or if it communicates the right energy. We obsess over the subjective.
I wouldn't even call that playing devil's advocate. I think that is exactly the human condition the text is highlighting. We do take the physics for granted because of modern industrialization. Standardized sizing means we just expect things to fit.
Right, it's a baseline.
Exactly. Once that basic survival need of covering our bodies is met, our brains immediately jump to higher level social processing. We are inherently meaning-making machines. We do not just want to be covered. We want to be understood. We want the clothes to speak for us before we even open our mouths.
That's so true.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, once we master these basic physical and aesthetic properties in front of the mirror, we have to actually take that yellow coat and walk out the front door.
Into the real world.
Right. We use these clothes as tools to navigate different, often highly complex social environments. Which brings us to the next evolution in the source material, how we talk about adapting to the world around us.
Okay, yeah. Because the vocabulary in the text shifts here, doesn't it? From static adjectives to highly dynamic phrasal verbs. We move from describing how clothes look in a mirror to describing how we use them as social maneuvers.
Precisely.
The core verbs introduced are dress up, dress down, try on, and wear out. These are the tools of the social chameleon. Let's look at dressing up.
Okay.
The text mentions things like galas, weddings, and job interviews. It requires specific uniforms, suits, ties, high heels. It feels like putting on a very specific type of formal armor.
It is an active demonstration of respect, but also of conformity. When you dress up, you are elevating your attire to meet a heightened social standard dictated by someone else.
Right, like the host of the wedding.
Or the corporate culture of the job interview. It requires effort, physical discomfort in some cases, and financial investment. You are subjugating your personal comfort to conform to the rules of the environment.
Then you have the opposite, which is dressing down. The source uses the classic example of casual Fridays at the office, where you might, swap the suit for jeans. It is framed as a relaxation of the rules.
It implies relaxation, yes, but the text suggests it is actually a highly sophisticated social maneuver. And before we get into the psychology of that, we have to look at the testing phase, which is trying on.
Well, the fitting room phase.
Exactly. This is the time spent in the fitting room, or standing in front of your open closet, rapidly swapping out different armors, trying to anticipate which one will allow you to survive the social scenario you are about to walk into. You are testing hypotheses about the environment.
And finally, the text talks about wearing out. It uses the example of someone having a favorite pair of shoes, wearing them every single day for years until they literally have holes in them and are ruined. It represents the physical decay of our favorite items.
It is the inevitable entropy of the clothing. But what is really compelling is how the text uses these verbs to illustrate social anxiety. The tension between dressing up and dressing down is where people experience the most friction.
Absolutely. The source features a story about a massive social miscalculation at a party. It's just a flawless narrative of a fashion disaster.
Oh, it's painful to read.
So painful. So a woman gets an invitation that explicitly says the event is formal. So she spends a full hour in the trying on phase. She's testing different dresses, trying to calibrate perfectly.
She's doing her homework.
Right. She finally decides to commit and dress up in a formal dress and high heels. She arrives at the party, opens the door, and is met with sheer horror. Everyone else is dressed down. The entire room is in jeans and t-shirts. She is entirely out of place. She ends up taking off her high heels because her feet hurt, noting the shoes were worn out anyway. But the real damage is social. It is a complete collapse of her navigation.
It perfectly illustrates how these phrasal verbs operate as tools of social conformity and, accidental rebellion. When you dress up based on the written rules, but the environment has secretly changed the unwritten rules to dress down, you become suddenly painfully hypervisible.
You stick out like a sore thumb.
Exactly. You're exposed as someone who misread the tribe.
But let me challenge the conventional wisdom here for a second. When we think of strict rules, we think of dressing up. But is dressing down actually a far more brutal social test?
How do you mean?
Think about it. When an invitation tells you to dress up for a black tie wedding, there is a very clear, established uniform. You rent a tuxedo or wear a floor-length gown. It is a binary pass-fail test. It is rigid, but it is clear.
Right, the boundaries are visible.
Exactly. But when you are told to dress down, like at that party, or in a modern office with a casual dress code, the boundaries are completely invisible. Casual could mean a crisp polo shirt and chinos, or it could mean ripped jeans and a vintage band tee.
You are hitting on the exact paradox of the modern casual dress code, and it aligns perfectly with the sociological undertones of the source text. Dressing down masquerades as freedom and comfort, but it actually carries its own incredibly complex unwritten rules.
Yeah, it's a trap.
It really is. When the rigid uniform is removed, you are no longer judged on your ability to follow simple instructions. You are judged on your personal calibration of the social environment.
Right. If you get it wrong, you end up like the woman at the party. You are either the stiffest person in the room, radiating anxious energy, or you are the most underdressed, signaling a lack of respect.
Exactly. It requires a much higher level of social intelligence and tribal knowledge to successfully dress down than it does to simply dress up. The woman in the anecdote failed the test because she trusted the formal written invitation over the unwritten, shifting social reality of her peer group.
She trusted the text over the subtext.
Bingo. The tribe had decided to signal ease and relaxation, and by signaling rigid formality, she became an outsider.
If navigating the rules of a single living room party is that fraught, navigating the broader culture is a psychological war zone.
Oh, without a doubt.
And that brings us to a major pivot in our source material. We move from describing how we act in specific rooms to the intense psychology of appearance itself. We are entering a territory where fashion becomes weaponized.
This is where the vocabulary takes a noticeably aggressive turn. The text introduces powerful idioms at this advanced level. We're talking dress to kill, dress to the nines, fashion victim, and fad, which eventually degrades into being out of style or dated.
Yeah, the language gets intense.
What is critical to observe here is the hidden aggression and the extreme ends of the power spectrum that these idioms represent.
Let's start with the aggression. Dressed to kill. The source notes this is used to describe someone who looks perfectly attractive and incredibly confident in their attire. But look at the imagery we use to kill.
It's very violent.
It is.
Yeah.
We are utilizing the language of violence, lethality, and predation to describe looking good at a cocktail party or a business meeting.
It is a striking metaphor that reveals how we truly view social interaction. Dressed to kill, much like dress to the nines, which means elegantly and perfectly put together, represents the absolute pinnacle of social dominance.
The top of the food chain.
Exactly. When you are dressed to kill, you are in absolute control of your aesthetic narrative. You are wielding your appearance as a weapon to command attention, to demand respect, or to elicit desire from the room. It is a highly active, dominant, almost predatory state. You are acting upon the environment.
Wow, okay.
But the source text immediately contrasts this active dominance with its dark, passive opposite, which is the fashion victim.
The fashion victim.
Man. The source defines this as someone who slavishly follows every single fashion trend, even if the clothes are wildly uncomfortable, highly expensive, and, going back to our earlier mirror test, absolutely do not suit them.
Right, they fail the suit test entirely.
They wear these things purely because society or a magazine or an influencer deems it cool.
Notice the massive shift in power dynamics here. If dressed to kill is active and dominant, the fashion victim is entirely passive.
They're just receiving the trend.
Yeah, they're surrendering their own physical comfort, their financial resources, and their own aesthetic judgment to the arbitrary whims of the crowd. They are controlled by the system rather than controlling their presence within it. They are, quite literally, a victim of external pressure.
And the mechanism that creates these victims is the fad. The source gives a very specific, recognizable example, which is huge, chunky sneakers.
Oh, everyone remembers those. Right, they explode into the culture. They are everywhere. You absolutely must own a pair to be relevant. And this lasts for exactly 2 months. And then as quickly as they appeared, they vanish. They become instantly dated or out of style.
A fad is a rapid spike in cultural value followed by a devastating crash. It is the ultimate test of the fashion victim because it moves so quickly, it bypasses any internal judgment of suitability and relies entirely on the fear of missing out.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. Is being a fashion victim basically just being a terrible day trader in the stock market of culture?
Wait, a day trader? I'm not sure I see the direct line there. How are you connecting a chunky sneaker to a stock portfolio?
Okay. Think about the behavior. A terrible day trader operates on pure emotion and FOMO. They see a stock rocketing up in value, they panic that they're missing out, and they buy in right at the absolute peak price moments before the bubble bursts.
Okay, I'm following you.
A fashion victim does the exact same thing with a fad. They buy the chunky sneakers at the absolute peak of their financial cost and social hype. The second they buy in, the cultural market turns, the trend dies, and they're left holding an asset, a closet full of shoes, that is entirely dated and out of style.
Yeah.
They bought high and lost everything in the social stock market.
I see your point, and it's a clever analogy, but I think the text points to something slightly more insidious.
Okay, how so?
Well, a day trader, even a terrible one, knows they are engaging in a financial transaction. They are trying to make money. A fashion victim rarely realizes they are engaged in a transaction at all.
Oh, that's a good point.
They think they are buying belonging. They think they are buying identity. They lack that internal metric of what actually suits them, so they rely entirely on external market indicators of what is cool. The tragedy isn't just that they lose cultural capital. It's that they never really knew why they were buying the stock in the first place.
That makes it so much worse. They are bankrupting their own identity to chase a market they don't even understand.
And it is vital to understand that this market volatility, the existence of these 2-month fads, is not just some quirky, organic, psychological phenomenon of crowds.
It's not an accident.
No, the source text makes it very clear that this volatility is deliberate. It is the engineered engine of a massive global industry.
Which brings us to the most intense and complex section of our deep dive. We are summiting the mountain of this vocabulary guide. We are moving from the psychology of the individual staring in the mirror to the macroeconomic reality of the world. We are looking at the true global cost of the closet.
This is where the vocabulary becomes deeply analytical and inherently critical of existing systems. We are zooming out to look at supply chains that span the globe.
It gets heavy.
It does. The core concepts that the text introduces here are fast fashion, exploitative supply chains, environmental degradation, microtrends, and hyper-consumerism.
Let's start with how the source frames the sheer speed of this industry, because it all comes back to time. The text meets a staggering historical contrast. Historically, the global fashion calendar operated on 4 distinct seasons a year: spring, summer, autumn, winter.
Right, which makes sense biologically.
Exactly. It took time to design, produce, and ship clothing. But today, the text asserts, the industry has mutated. There are no longer 4 seasons, there are 52 seasons a year. A new season every single week.
This hyper-accelerated, relentless cycle is the defining characteristic of fast fashion. The text specifically points to massive global brands companies like Shein, Zara, and H&M as the architects of this model.
The giants of the industry.
Yeah, fast fashion is defined by the rapid, incredibly cheap mass production of clothing that is designed to reflect current trends almost instantaneously.
Like if a celebrity wears a unique jacket on a Tuesday, or a specific aesthetic goes viral on a Friday, a cheap mass-produced copy is being manufactured and shipped by the following week. It is whiplash speed.
Now, the stated goal of this industry, the marketing pitch that these companies use, is the democratization of style.
Okay, what does that mean?
The argument is that fashion shouldn't just be for the wealthy elite in Paris or Milan. Everyone, regardless of their income bracket, should have the ability to afford the latest trends, to express themselves, and to participate in the current cultural conversation. On its face, it sounds incredibly egalitarian.
But I'm going to push back on the critique here for a second just to examine that argument. Isn't there some truth to that?
How do you mean?
Think about a teenager from a lower-income family who wants to fit in at high school. High school is a brutal social environment. If fast fashion allows them to buy the trendy jacket for $15 instead of $200, and that saves them from being bullied or labeled out of style, isn't that a genuine social good? Doesn't fast fashion actually protect people from the social penalties we were just talking about?
That is exactly the tension the text wrestles with, and it is a very valid point regarding immediate social survival. However, and I want to be clear here that we are just objectively reporting the source material's critique of this industry, not endorsing a side.
Right. We're just looking at what the text says.
Exactly. So the source material argues that this democratization of style ultimately operates as a smokescreen.
A smokescreen.
Yeah. It's a compelling narrative that hides a much darker systemic reality. The text argues that to provide that teenager with a $15 jacket, the industry has to extract a true cost from somewhere else.
And the source is unflinching about where that cost is extracted from. It points directly to exploitative supply chains. To keep prices artificially low, to create a world where you can buy a t-shirt for $5, wear it to one party, and then throw it in a garbage can, these companies cannot pay fair wages.
They just can't. The math doesn't work.
The text explicitly notes that this model relies on sweatshops, child labor, and entirely unregulated factories, predominantly located in developing nations.
The term exploitative supply chains is precise. The true financial cost of the $5 shirt is not magically eliminated by corporate efficiency. It is displaced.
Displaced onto who?
The financial burden is removed from the Western consumer, but the physical, emotional, and ethical burden is placed heavily onto the most vulnerable laborers in the global economy.
Wow. And it goes beyond the human cost, too. The text introduces the term environmental degradation. It highlights a statistic that is frankly hard to wrap your head around. The global fashion industry is the second largest polluter of clean water in the world.
It's staggering.
When you think of water pollution, you think of oil spills or chemical plants, right?
Yeah.
Not the dye from a $5 t-shirt, but the sheer volume of dyes, the release of microplastics from synthetic fabrics washing in our machines, and the literal mountains of textile waste generated by clothes worn twice and thrown away is devastating ecosystems.
This raises an important question, and the text connects it directly back to the psychology we discussed earlier. Fast fashion relies on what it calls micro-trends, which are just fads that have been accelerated to a fever pitch. These micro-trends fuel a state of hyper-consumerism.
So the industry manufactures the anxiety. It creates 52 seasons a year, constantly bombarding you with the message that what you bought last month is now dated.
Exactly.
It weaponizes your fear of being a fashion victim, and then it benevolently offers you the $5 cure for the exact anxiety it just created in you.
It is a closed loop of hyper-consumerism. The consumer is trapped on a treadmill, constantly buying cheap items to stay relevant, throwing them away and buying more, all while the environmental and human costs compound globally.
But how do we reconcile this? The source paints a picture where the everyday person is completely cornered. You are caught between social survival, wanting to look good, wanting to fit in at the office, wanting to avoid being judged as out of style, and global ethics.
It's a rock and a hard place.
Because ethical, sustainable clothing made with fair labor is often incredibly expensive, placing it out of reach for many. Are we just trapped in this system?
That feeling of being trapped, that tension between our personal aesthetic desires and the devastating global consequences of those desires, is exactly where the source material delivers its final, most complex concept.
Okay, lay it on me.
To understand why we are trapped, we have to deeply analyze why we care so much about our appearance in the first place. Why is it so important to us that we are willing to participate in this system?
That brings us to the absolute peak of the linguistic journey. The text introduces a highly advanced C2 level adjective, sartorial.
A beautiful word.
It is. It refers to anything related to clothes, tailoring, or style. You might hear someone complimented on their impeccable sartorial choices. But the text pairs this elegant word with a very heavy sociological theory, performative identity.
Performative identity is the key that unlocks everything we have discussed today. The text defines it as the act of constructing who we are for the outside world through visual symbols.
So, treating getting dressed like putting on a play?
Basically, yes. It argues that getting dressed is never a neutral act. It isn't just about covering our physical bodies to protect them from the cold. It is a profound, constant statement about our internal values, our class, our aspirations, and our tribal affiliations.
Right.
Every single time you make a sartorial choice, every time you choose the yellow coat over the black one, or the jeans over the suit, you are performing a version of yourself for an audience.
So what does this all mean? How does the text synthesize the physics of getting dressed, the anxiety of the mirror, the fads, and the global supply chains into one cohesive thought?
The source provides a culminating thesis statement that brings the entire vocabulary lesson into sharp, uncomfortable focus.
Let's hear it.
It states, "We use our sartorial choices as a tool for performative identity. However, by participating in the fast fashion cycle, we prioritize our own fleeting aesthetic expression over basic human rights and global sustainability."
Man, I just want to pause and sit with that for a second. We prioritize our own fleeting aesthetic expression over basic human rights. I am just marveling at the architecture of this text.
It's quite the journey, isn't it?
We started nearly an hour ago talking about a basic grammatical error. We were talking about the physics of putting on a jacket versus wearing it. We were analyzing the tape measure in the mirror. And step by step, word by word, this vocabulary guide has led us into a profound moral crisis.
It is a masterful demonstration of why acquiring advanced language is so vital. The ultimate goal of language at this level isn't just to describe the physical objects in the room.
No, it's so much more.
It is to give you the precise intellectual tools required to dissect and critique the systems you live inside. You cannot dismantle a system if you cannot accurately name its parts.
That's so true.
You need words like exploitative supply chains and performative identity to even begin to articulate the complex web of guilt, commerce, and self-expression that is currently hanging inside your closet.
It is an incredible journey. And as we prepare to wrap up this deep dive, let's take a rapid descent back down the linguistic mountain we just climbed, just to see how far we've come.
Sure. We started at the absolute foundation, examining the mechanics of getting dressed. We looked in the mirror to understand the difference between objective physics and subjective aesthetics.
Right. Learning that fit is a matter of size and geometry, while suit is a matter of style, emotion, and perception.
Then we walked out the front door and learned how to survive as social chameleons. We figured out how to dress up as an act of formal conformity.
And how to dress down to navigate the invisible, often far more treacherous rules of casual environments, trying desperately to avoid arriving in high heels when everyone else is in jeans.
From there, we entered the psychological minefield of weaponized fashion. We explored the active, predatory dominance of being dressed to kill and contrasted it with the passive tragedy of the fashion victim.
The victim who constantly buys high and sells low on every passing 2-month fad.
And finally, we zoomed out to the global summit. We analyzed the macroeconomic nightmare of fast fashion. We exposed the democratization of style as a smokescreen confronting the exploitative supply chains and the massive environmental degradation that fuel our hyper-consumerism.
And we did all of this to finally understand that our daily sartorial choices are ultimately an exercise in performative identity.
It is a tremendous amount of information to process, and the source material actually leaves the reader with a specific assignment, a personal audit of your own closet.
Oh, homework.
Yes, homework. So we pose this question directly to you, the listener. Has you ever been a fashion victim? When you open your closet doors tomorrow morning, do you see garments that reflect your true, enduring values? Or do you see a graveyard of discarded micro-trends? Do your sartorial choices actually align with your ethics, or just your desire to fit in?
It is a heavy question to start your morning with, and I want to leave you with one final provocative thought that builds on everything we have explored today. Something to mull over the next time you are standing in front of that mirror. Okay. The source text showed us that possessing advanced vocabulary words like exploitative supply chains and performative identity gives us the immense power to critique the world around us.
Right.
But consider the reverse of that idea. Does lacking this vocabulary make it easier for society to ignore the consequences of our closets?
Oh, that's interesting.
If we only ever possess the basic words to describe fitting in, will we ever have the intellectual power to actually change the system? Or will we just keep hitting the play button, putting on the exact same fast fashion shirt every day, completely oblivious to the music playing in the background?
That is a question that certainly changes how you look at your own reflection.
It absolutely does. Thank you for joining us on this expansive deep dive. We hope we have given you the tools to think critically and maybe a little differently the next time you get dressed for the day.
Until next time, stay curious.